Hey, friends, welcome to the Overcoming Adversity podcast, where it's all about a transformational growth and having a resilient mindset. Today, we have on the show Miss Lilia Bogoeva. She is a somatic empowerment coach, and she has a very fascinating story. She's someone that has been through traumatic experiences in her life and overcame so much adversities. And she talks about how she manifested lots of things in her life and changed her life. I can't wait to get into this episode. Let's go. Lilia, welcome to the Overcoming Adversity podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. Your story is so inspiring. I was reading through your bio and seeing all of the amazing things that you've done and the journey from where you've been through. It's fascinating to be here to actually tell that story. If you can, tell us a little bit about who you are and how did you get to become this woman that you are now, because you've been through a lot.
Thank you. It actually means a lot to hear you say that you find my story really inspiring. So thank you for that. So I am a somatic practitioner, a performing artist, primarily in music. I'm the front woman of the metal band Carcaza, and I do a combination of speaking, coaching. I'm working on a book as well. And yeah, what I do is I am dedicated to helping ambitious high achievers to bridge those gaps between inner healing and real world success. So
Mhm.
entrepreneurial, athletic, and artistic types like myself, we can be very hesitant to admit that we're struggling with anything internal or external, and really hesitant to get help because in the entrepreneurial world it's very valued to be independent and always stoic and strong. So it doesn't seem contradictory to admit that you're struggling with anything and to get help. But I'm here to show people that no, it's actually the opposite. Sometimes I ask people the question when I work with my clients, like, what's your priority? Is it proving that you're tough or getting good work done? Because actually, that radical, isolated independence to the point where it's in something very isolating can be very counterproductive. I mean, nobody ever accomplished anything major entirely alone. So I help people to reach into their body senses and their creativity, but to use that not only for this isolated independence, but rather to work on yourself to improve the way you work with others and relate to the world. But I don't do things like the relationship counseling end of it. I don't really work on people's relationships. I help people do their deep inner work with themselves and use that as a foundation to improve their relationship with the outside world. And because my background is in music, also sports, especially gymnastics and dance, my methods combine that. So, somatics is the practice of tapping into your mind body connection. So, basically, using your body's senses to improve
Yes.
your mentality, both in the short and in the long run. So, I've noticed that music is a mind body empowerment experience. And so are sports and dance if you let them be. So, all those things, like I've been through that dark side of the sports and fitness world where it's all about having the strongest body and just being number one, and to the point where you stop doing it for yourself and do it just for these rankings and approval and stuff like that. So I help these ambitious driven people tap into their intrinsic motivation and see that their God-given soul already has worth, because that's when passion can turn into toxic obsession. It's when you start thinking that your worth on this earth is entirely defined by these materialistic achievements. That's where you have these people. For example, musicians who are on top of the charts, like, oh, as long as I'm number one, I feel good about myself. The second I drop to number two, oh, suddenly I'm not good enough anymore. Like, I help people get away from that sort of thing.
I find that, we live in this day and time now where we're we're taught to be competitive, but then once either different aspects of things happen to us in life, then we become living in this comparison day and age, just kind of like what you're saying. So if I'm not living up to this, or I'm not measuring up to this, opposed to measuring things against ourselves or whatever our expectations are opposed to what other people's expectations are, then it leads to disappointment and leads to this comparison lifestyle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I call that comparison purgatory because go anywhere, right? It's always like I've seen that with people who have weight loss goals. So weight loss or any kind of fitness goal. So I started out as a regular personal trainer before I realized that somatics is really where my passion lies, because
Right.
I'm so much passionate about helping people get fit. I'm passionate about helping people use their bodies to improve their mentality. So to use inner resources to build a strong relationship with yourself. And I found that in the fitness world, there's too much distraction with all that. Oh, what do your abs look like? And you got to lift more than the others. You got to run a mile faster than the others and stuff like that. And yeah, I've seen that sometimes people will get into this thing where they will have a fitness goal and then they'll meet it. And now, though, because you met that first goal, like let's say your goal was losing 10 pounds, because I've had clients literally do this sort of thing. They get to their goal weight, but in the process, they started following all these fitness models on social media, these fitspiration influencers. So now they start comparing themselves to these fitness influencers who are all, not only are they ripped, but they also have like Photoshop and touch ups and airbrushing.
Yeah, it's a lot of that stuff that's tied to the industry nowadays, and I'm glad people like you exist where you could caution people on some of those things because they get that illusion built up into their minds and leads them down to a road of disappointment. I want to hop into a couple of these questions here. So you are someone that has been through some traumatic experiences. If you can share with our audience some of the things that you've been through to the point of now you're helping people, because I think when it comes to the work that you're doing, and for our listeners, they want to identify with someone that kind of has been down that road, and you have a story. You know what I mean? I could see that you've been through some things here when it came to anorexia, bulimia, depression. You grew up as an immigrant in a home that came with some things within inside of that household, and I could think about, and I'm asking that as in, for myself, I'm an immigrant from Jamaica, right? And I've dealt with a couple of things. And then I'm someone that served in the military that dealt with some depression, PTSD, and mental health issues and how it affected me. So if you can share with our audience some of your experience of what you've been through and how did you get through those situations in your life to now you're help leading people as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I've realized that most of my mental health struggles are pretty typical of the entrepreneurial, performing arts, and athletics world, have a lot to do with that constant competition. But yeah, basically, I grew up with the parents who immigrated from Bulgaria. From shortly after that Soviet Union fell apart. And yeah, there's some struggles for them to integrate into American culture. It's cool, I think, when you have this dual identity, how you can relate to two different places. But I think that it's a skill in being able to utilize that. So
Mhm.
some of the challenges that come with an immigrant household are that their income level would gradually grow over the years with my family. So that was really cool to see their hard work giving those tangible results. And that was very inspiring to me, just watching my parents do whatever it takes to support the family. But at
Right.
the same time, that comes with its own challenges as being a young child when you don't fully comprehend all that stuff. So I had to get very used to doing activities by myself because I'm like, okay, I don't want to bother my parents. They're working. Either they're like out at work, or if they're at home, sometimes they're still working on the computer or phone meetings and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, I can't get in the way. So I got to do a lot of stuff myself, which can be good news and bad news at the
Right.
same time. It is great to be able to work alone and have that intrinsic work ethic. But at the same time, if you get too addicted to isolation and start indulging in that, because that's what I've done throughout my life. I also had a bit of a health issue with my, actually substantial issue, I thought, with migraines. I was a frequent migraine sufferer. And that actually informed my eating disorders because I got used to needing to restrict my food for long periods, not being able to eat because I would just vomit automatically. Some
Wow.
so I'd say that the combination of getting used to a little bit too much self-isolation plus that weird relationship with food that I got. I mean, when I would randomly get migraines, like severe vomiting and all that, I do think that it tarnished my relationship with food to an extent because I couldn't fully trust my body to do what it needed with it. And yeah, when I was 10 is when I first started dabbling into dieting and weight loss, but I wasn't doing it consistently until I was 13. But boy, did I get, quote, good at it. That was shortly after I hit 13. Because at that age, I started getting some friends who do that body shaming thing. My best friend who did sports with me, she was a lot skinnier and she was a, quote, picky eater. She described herself as that. And yeah, she would make fun of my size a lot of the time. And I can't believe you're eating that. You're going to get more fat and stuff like that. I was good at brushing it off for like 2 years while we were together. But by the third year, I felt like I started absorbing a lot more of that. And I feel like having the migraines made me, quote, rehearse starving myself because I would have to go like 1 or 2 days without eating or barely eating. And yeah,
Mhm.
I got really good at that whole project because I considered it my project. I really wanted something to do entirely on my own. I got overindulgent in that whole working on things myself thing. So yeah, losing weight was my first project. I got massively underweight. My lowest, I had a BMI of about 13, which is like ridiculously low.
Wow.
I could pretty much double wrap my hand around my wrist at that point. It's
Wow.
like what? That big? How is that even possible? It's like the size of a quarter practically with my wrist. But yeah, what was challenging about getting through that was the fact that that was in the mid 2000s. I feel like now compared to then, eating disorder recovery was very archaic at that point because my parents got me some help from a therapist and a doctor. Now, we never did any structured recovery program, nothing like recovery coaching or no inpatient treatment. But yeah, they were not at that time saying the same things they are now. At the time that everyone would chalk it up to, oh, you see these models on TV and you get really shallow and you don't care about your health and you don't care what you do to the family. All you care about is vanity and losing weight. And I was like, no, it's not the case. That is not it. But at that time, I didn't have the words to articulate what my true intention was. And when you can't name your feelings and describe what you are feeling and thinking, then that makes therapy not all that effective because with therapy, you hit a dead end as soon as you're unable to accurately describe your thoughts and feelings.
Mhm.
And at the same time, most therapists of the day, at least the one that I tried a couple of different therapists, and none of them on their own understood that whole relationship between emotional wounds, into radical excessive independence, and eating disorders. So they were not going to figure that out for me, and I couldn't communicate it. At some point, I just got so disappointed in myself because I thought that I was ruining everything. Because part of the motivation that adults around me had was that they would use a lot of fear training, like descriptions of how horrible my death will be. You're going to starve yourself and it's going to be a painful, miserable death and you're going to die in vain. And so it was like, this is not helping. Like all that did was make me feel more hopeless and helpless. I would try to follow recommendations. Like at one point we tried mental health medications, but actually triggered more migraines in me, which is more weight loss and more, oh, you lost weight again. Clearly you don't care about recovery. Putting all those things in my mind that were not true about myself, but it
Yeah.
was for me to separate all of that. So I did, by 14, I seriously planned on actually ending my life. Not only that I thought about it before then for almost a year, but at one point I made a detailed plan on exactly how I do so. And I had the intention to actually implement tonight. I was thinking today, but I would just hear these voices. I hear voices and I see things just telling me, no, shut out all that noise. Reach inside yourself, and someday you'll do something that the world will value. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. I think that's worth sticking around for. And yet, that searching for something I feel inside but cannot understand, I've been pursuing that for the last 15 years ever since that moment, and it's been a trial and error, I tried a lot of different
I
niches
want
for
I want
myself.
to follow up and ask you this, because hearing your story and being on the brinks of suicide, I, you know, I take that very serious, and for you to still be here, thank God that you're here, right?
Thank
I want to ask you, for that listener that's listening, right? You're here to tell your story of what you've been through mentally, right? How important is it for you when it comes to self-respect, self-love, and personal care? Because you chose to work on yourself, right, to become the better person, the better version of you today, to the point of you're helping people now.
Yes. Now, one thing that I deal with is helping people find their passion and distinguishing passion from obsession because they look basically the same. So,
Uh-huh.
genuine passion is built on that foundation of self respect and self love, understanding your God given worth. Whereas a toxic obsession is built on, I at my core have no value. I need to prove myself through these accomplishments. And
Right.
that's extremely important to me because ever since then, see, it did not end with anorexia. I got into bulimia and alcohol and drug addiction too, because I had that ambition addiction. I was so incredibly obsessed with proving my worth through my accomplishments because I still carried that shame of what I did to harm myself and the family. Sometimes emotional trauma can lead to this situation where you really badly want to redeem it because no one wants to think that they're suffering entirely in vain. And sometimes we could find our passions in what helped us get through it. So, physical activity and music did a lot to help me get through that first wound of anorexia and even the emotional struggles of growing up in the immigrant household, too. But sometimes I would take it so far that I would completely lose my shit if I made mistakes, even in practice sessions, because I would literally feel like I was dying if I could not get my performance right. So it's very important for me to show people how to distinguish that. Like, hey, what is your motivation? What's your foundation? Is it thinking that you're worthless and that you need to accomplish X things or else you have no worth and you might as well be dead? Or is it that you genuinely love who you are and you want to share that with others? So if that is not the case, if my client is not built on the foundation of self respect, I help them to reconnect with that.
I want to ask you, and I think this is so pivotal in this day and age. We're in a crazy time, crazy world right now. For that listener that's listening right now and that is identifying with your story, what are some practical steps that they could take right now if they're on the verge of depression, suicide, anxiety, um, not knowing which direction to go in their lives? What are some practical steps that they could take away and just start taking some action in their lives today with?
Yeah, for sure. So that would be a combination of your inner work and reaching out into the world to get the help that you need. So, tapping into the mind, body, and soul. So, of course, it's always a good idea to go and reach out for help. Don't hold this all inside of you, because that's how we can go completely crazy. We can get too indulgent in that radical independence and thinking that it's strength to hold things locked inside of us. But that could just plant a seed of this self destructive misery. But at the same time, how do you know what kind of help and outreach is really going to serve you the best? Because, like I shared in my story, not every therapist is going to be the right fit for you and your situation. So, how do you know what's the right fit? That comes from doing that deep inner work, connecting with your own mind, body, and soul. Because when you work on yourself, you get to really know thyself. And when you know thyself, then you can recognize what other person is going to help you get to where you need to go. Because sometimes we could get into some bad situations when we're thinking, oh, I just need help, somebody, anybody. I just need anyone to accept me and hold my hand. And that is how I've known people who fall into either, like myself, some bad relationships with a therapist, like getting a therapist who's not the right fit. Also, bad relationships romantically. Like I've had that happen before where I got into these psychological, I don't know if you want to call it that, psychologically abusive relationships,
Uh-huh.
because I have this whole like, oh, I just want to connect with someone. But for me, that attitude didn't really last long because I hear these voices always telling me to reach inside myself. So I thank God for that, because I do think that voice is straight from God, the one that tells me to know myself first. But yeah, I know a lot of people could get into some horribly codependent or abusive relationships if they're too eager to connect with someone and be accepted right out the gate. So, say doing your deep inner work on yourself. I think that that should come as a priority before reaching out. But I do think that it's a feedback loop. I think doing the inner work helps you connect with other people, which helps you know yourself better, which helps you connect with the world around you, which again goes back and forth.
Absolutely. So I told you I was impressed by your story and also impressed by your approach in regards to helping people. If you can share with us, keeping confidentiality at the utmost highest, but can you share with us a client that you've worked with or a testimonial and how someone came to you and how you changed their lives?
Yeah, so one young man I've been working with for a couple of years, he had been struggling with cigarette addiction and binge drinking more than he would like to. He started getting some cognitive dissonance about that stuff, also anger and emotional control issues. He also had a difficult upbringing where he came from, so he'd had a long history of being very emotionally impulsive. So going between those two extremes of, oh, I need to hold all my emotions in because that's what true strength looks like, to
Hmm.
eventually reaching that breaking point. Because when you hold all this in, it's like a ticking time bomb. So he was
Correct.
very prone to going from looking perfectly stoic to completely exploding about even small things, like if his partner put the water bottle in the wrong place, he completely explode. Oh, because things aren't organized right. So that's a sign, not that a person is a bad person or not even that the person is unable to control themselves, but that they don't know how to appropriately control their emotions. Because when you get into those extremes of hyper control, I consider it like a triangle. First, there is that hyper self control. Then it leads to a breaking point, which leads to that impulsive explosion, which then leads you to feeling ashamed of that, which then leads you back to the start of that triangle, which is trying to be ultra self controlled to discipline yourself. There's some self punishment involved in that. So with him, it resonated a lot with me because both him and myself would get into that triangle between extreme self-control to explosive impulsivity to shame and guilt, and constantly cycling between that, like a shit triangle, pretty much. And what helped him a lot was when I realized that I had to meet him where he was at. So
Yeah.
he was someone I worked with at the start of this journey of applying somatic healing, music, and fitness all together. So at first, I was working with him on functional fitness because for me personally, and a lot of the clients I'd worked with on fitness and sports, they've had a lot of self improvement from working on their fitness. But for him, he was not quite ready to jump into a heavily structured fitness program. So I had to meet him where he's at. So we kept it pretty moderate within what he's comfortable doing. What made, I think, the biggest difference for him was the regular daily mind body meditation. So
Mm.
somatic healing is so cool because that's where we take the bare bones fundamentals of your mind body connection. So instead of saying, oh, it always has to be this big athletic showy thing, it can be just that bare bones of recognizing your breath, recognizing how certain emotions feel in your body, where the tension is lying in your physical body, and releasing physical tension to then release your mental stress. So for
Mm.
him, I would send him his daily meditations about that mind body awareness and recognizing how emotions feel in the body. And he would do those. And then in our one-to-one sessions, we'd work on that in more detail, like talking through it, and also work on some of the functional fitness elements. He's also in the music industry like myself, because from my band Carcaza, of course, I would meet other musicians from the band I work with on a regular basis. And while we're talking backstage before and after shows, we, talk about what else we do, if we do anything else besides just playing the band. So that's how I get those conversations started. I've seen a huge need for this among musicians, especially the independent entrepreneurial types. And yeah, that was a huge success because I had previously thought that things need to be very big and extreme to be valuable, but working with him showed the both of us, because actually we both had that same belief that, oh, something needs to be really extreme. But with him, I saw that we needed to break it down to the bare essentials.
Yeah.
And he noticed that too, like, wow, there is so much value in just noticing my breath and noticing that. Because as I was telling him, your body detects your stress before your brain can label it. He had a struggle with not knowing when he's getting angry. Like, he didn't realize he was angry until he was exploding. So through that mind body awareness training, he learned how to recognize those early signs of psychological tension, because they manifest as physical tension and twitch. He's very much like, he would get kind of twitchy when he's getting frustrated. So being more aware of that. And it was a humongous success that makes the both of us very proud.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that story. I really like knowing that you're actually putting in the work and working with clients and seeing that transformation in them, especially when somebody that's close to you, like you guys are in the music industry.
Yeah.
Before we get ready to wrap up and get out of here, if you can you share with us how important it is to become much more self-aware with what is going on in our lives, and then if you can leave us with some life lessons or some tips based off some of your experiences that our audience could take away and make sure they implement some of these things into their lives.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, working on yourself is the foundation to be able to work with others in your
Mhm.
world better. And overall, I'd say the biggest takeaway should be to make sure that you are motivated by passion instead of obsession, and know the difference between the two. Actually, just last weekend, I did a speech on this at a music conference. And always connect with your intrinsic worth, whether you are spiritual or not. I consider it your God-given value in your soul.
Hmm.
Always use that as your foundation. And remember that you don't need to think that there is just one way to prove that you are strong and valuable. So, a lot of us entrepreneurial types do struggle with unhealed emotional wounds, obsessive and addictive tendencies, and being afraid to truly be ourselves around others. And sometimes ambition can become an addiction in its own that leads to others.
Yeah.
Me, that's where I would abuse stimulants and alcohol and depressants and all that because I was so dedicated to success. I was like, I'm going to take this, I'm going to snort this thing so that I can keep working longer hours so I don't ever get tired. And I thought it was kind of a good thing because it was driven by my desire for achievement. Like,
Right.
no, it's not a good thing if your intentions and foundations are not in the right zone for that. And I also want to let people know that a lot of us are here to help. Like, I am here to help through my coaching, speaking, and writing. And there are a lot of other practitioners who are here to help as well.
Absolutely. So, Lilia, if anybody wanted to work you, book you for another speaking gig, or get you, just get a hold of you in regards to like social media, how can they find you?
Okay, yeah. The best place to start would be my website, liliademoncrusher.com. And there, as soon as you enter, you have the option to sign up for the email list where you can get a free demo course. It's just an 18-minute video where I demonstrate each of these methods that I use. I call it my 5-phase inner demon crusher cycle, where we work on your why, your purpose and goals, your basic mind body connection, finding your voice through music and writing, expressing yourself through artistic creativity, and then functional movement as well. So check that out. And from there, you can also see examples of my speaking. So if you want to book me for a speaking gig, you can see live demo reels of me on stage and get to know more about my story. And then as well, you can check out my social media handles. On YouTube, I'm Lilia, the Inner Demon Crusher, and on those short form platforms like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you can find me at Lilia Demon Crusher. Because that's what I do. I help people crush inner demons, live in freedom. That's what that is all about. So these things that I've mentioned, the toxic obsession, unhealed emotional wounds, and fear of being yourself around others, those are all types of inner demons that can manifest through those things like eating disorder, addiction, um, bad relationships, and all kinds of other stuff. So I help people that crush those inner demons and live in freedom.
Hey, Lilia, it's absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Guys, if you like this episode and you want to crush those inner demon, make sure you leave a comment, make sure you give a thumbs up, make sure you share this episode. You know, Lilia came on to this podcast episode, and like I said, I've been very impressed with what she's talking about and what she's doing in regards to helping people. And I think it's so important in this day and time when mental health is at one of the highest levels that you could think of. So, before we get out of here, Lydia, any last words?
I would say thank you very much, Michael, for having me on this podcast. It's been an honor. And yeah, I just hope that today I inspired other people to face their demons with courage and crush them.
Absolutely. Until next time, guys, God bless.
God bless.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.